Julia Parker's personal phone buzzed on her nightstand, the one that only her father and two close friends had the number to. She jolted awake, heart racing with the familiar spike of fear that came with late-night calls, already reaching for it in the dark bedroom of her modest apartment. "Hello?" Her voice came out thick with sleep and worry. I'm sorry, I thought this was..." A man's voice, deep and uncertain. A pause. Who is this? Not her father. Not the hospital. Julia's pulse began to slow. Wrong number. But something in his tone, raw, unguarded, almost broken, made her not hang up immediately. "You called me," she said gently, sitting up and pushing her hair back. "Are you okay?" Gabriel Shaw stared at his phone in the rain-dark penthouse, realizing with sick certainty that he'd pressed the wrong contact. Not the grief counseling hotline he'd saved 3 months ago and never called. Someone's personal number, and now a woman's voice, warm, concerned, real, was asking if he was okay. He should apologize and hang up. Instead, at 2:47 a.m., exhausted from another board meeting where he'd smiled and performed and felt nothing, the words spilled out. "No," he said quietly. "I don't think I am." Julia's bedroom was dark except for the glow of her alarm clock. She should hang up. She had to be at the clinic by 7, and her father's morning medications needed organizing before she left. But that one word, "no," held such naked honesty that her counselor instincts, the ones she'd shelved when life got too expensive for grad school, kicked in. "Do you want to talk about it?" she asked, pulling her knees up under her worn comforter. "I'm awake now anyway." She didn't know who he was. The relief hit him like whiskey, warming, loosening something in his chest. No recognition, no calculation, just simple human kindness from a stranger at 3 in the morning. "I don't even know your name," Gabriel said, walking to his windows, watching rain streak down over the sleeping city he owned pieces of. "Julia," she offered. "And you are?" He hesitated. Then, "Gabriel. Just Gabriel." They talked for an hour. He told her about feeling hollow despite success, about losing his wife 2 years ago to cancer, how their marriage had been cold long before she got sick, how he'd stayed out of duty, how the guilt and relief still tangled in his chest. He spoke about being valued only for what he could provide, never for who he was. Julia listened the way she'd learned to listen during her abbreviated counseling training, with full attention, asking gentle questions that helped him find his own truths. She didn't offer empty platitudes. She didn't try to fix him. When he finally asked about her, dawn was starting to gray her windows. "I work at a medical clinic," Julia said simply. "Evening shift, mostly administrative. I take care of my dad. He had a stroke last year. It's just a lot of maintenance, you know? Keeping all the plates spinning." Her voice held a quiet strength that made Gabriel want to know everything about her. Not the polished, ambitious women who circulated through his world like sharks, but this calm, steady presence who'd given him an hour of genuine human connection without asking for anything in return. "Can I call you again?" The question surprised him as much as it probably surprised her. A pause. Then carefully, "If you need to talk, yes." "Tomorrow night?" Too eager. He pulled back. "If that's okay." "Okay," Julia said softly. "Good night, Gabriel." After she hung up, Gabriel stood at his window until the sun rose, feeling something he hadn't felt in years. Anticipation. 3 weeks later, Julia's phone rang every night between 10 and 11. She'd finish helping her father to bed, change into comfortable clothes, and wait. They talked about everything. His complicated relationship with success, her abandoned dreams of becoming a therapist, the small moments that made life worth living. She still didn't know Gabriel's last name. He was just a voice, an intelligence, a wounded soul that seemed to be healing through their conversations. And if she'd started looking forward to his calls with an intensity that scared her, if her heart jumped every time her phone buzzed, well, that was her secret. On the 24th night, he said, "I want to meet you." Julia's breath caught. The fantasy, held safe by distance and phone lines, suddenly became real and terrifying. "I don't know if that's a good idea," she said, curled up on her small couch. Gabriel heard the fear in her voice and understood it. They'd built something fragile and precious in the dark. What if daylight destroyed it? "Julia?" He was in his study, contract papers abandoned. "These calls are the only real thing in my life right now. I need to know if what I feel is... If we could..." He couldn't finish. Vulnerability still felt like stepping off a cliff. "What do you feel?" Julia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Like I've been asleep for years and you woke me up," Gabriel said roughly. "Like maybe I could be something other than a name on buildings and a signature on contracts. Like I want to see your face when you laugh and know what your hand feels like in mine, and..." He stopped, jaw tight. "Tell me I'm not alone in this." Julia closed her eyes, heart hammering. She'd been half in love with him for 2 weeks, maybe longer. A man she'd never seen, who didn't even know she lived in a one-bedroom apartment 40 minutes from downtown, who probably had a life so far removed from hers they might as well be different species. "You're not alone," she whispered. Gabriel exhaled, relief and terror mixing. "Have dinner with me. Saturday, please." "Okay." That Saturday, Gabriel arrived at the small Italian restaurant early, neutral ground, Julia's choice. Wearing jeans and a simple shirt, trying not to look like the man whose face appeared in Forbes. His hands were actually shaking. Julia saw him the moment she entered. Tall, dark-haired, somehow both powerful and uncertain as he stood from the corner booth. Their eyes met, and recognition flared, not of faces, but of souls. She walked toward him in her nicest dress, the navy one she saved for important occasions, and watched his face transform as she approached. She was beautiful, not in the calculated, maintained way of his usual world, but naturally, warmly beautiful. Brown hair falling in soft waves, eyes that held kindness and exhaustion in equal measure, a mouth that curved into a tentative smile that made his chest tight. "Julia," he said, voice rough. "Gabriel." They stood there, awkward and afraid and wanting, until Gabriel reached out his hand. She took it, and the touch, their first physical contact after weeks of intimate conversation, sent electricity straight through him. His hand was warm, strong, gentle. Julia felt tears prick her eyes at the simple reality of him. Solid, real, here. They sat. They ordered food neither of them tasted. And they talked like they'd been talking for weeks. Except now Julia could watch expressions cross his face, could see the way his eyes softened when he looked at her, could feel the magnetic pull between them, growing with every passing minute. Halfway through dinner, Gabriel reached across the table and covered her hand with his. "I need to tell you something." Julia's fingers tightened on his. "Okay." "My full name is Gabriel Shaw. He watched for the recognition, the calculation, the change. "I'm the CEO of Shaw Industries. I have money, a lot of it. I didn't tell you because I needed someone who saw me, not the portfolio." Julia stared at him, puzzle pieces clicking into place. Gabriel Shaw, the tech and investment billionaire whose name was indeed on buildings, who'd been photographed at charity galas and in business magazines. Her first instinct was to pull away. This was so far beyond her world, it was laughable. But then she looked at his face, saw the fear there, the vulnerability, the man she'd come to know in the dark hours of night. "Are you still just Gabriel when it's late and you can't sleep?" she asked quietly. The question pierced him. Yes, he said hoarsely. With you, I'm only ever just Gabriel. Then that's who I'm here with, Julia said simply. They stood outside her apartment building an hour later. Gabriel had offered his driver, she'd accepted after initial protest, and the city sounds faded to nothing as they faced each other on the quiet street. Can I see you again? Gabriel asked, though what he meant was, can I see you every day for the rest of my life? Yes, Julia said, and the happiness in her voice made him reckless. He stepped closer, hand coming up to cup her face, thumb brushing her cheekbone. Can I kiss you? Julia's breath stuttered. She'd imagined this, but reality was overwhelming. His height, his warmth, the intensity in his dark eyes, the gentle way he touched her like she was precious. Yes, she whispered. Gabriel kissed her softly at first, just a brush of lips, giving her every chance to pull back. When she didn't, when instead she made a small sound and moved closer, he deepened it, pouring weeks of longing into the kiss, feeling her hands grip his shirt, tasting her sweetness. Want roared through him, primal and demanding. He wanted to carry her upstairs, lay her down, learn every inch of her, make her his in every way possible. The kiss was everything, tender and hungry and perfect. Julia felt herself melting into him, her hands sliding up to his shoulders, his neck threading into his hair. Heat pooled low in her belly, and her mind spun with images of them tangled together, his hands on her skin, no barriers between them. But beneath the want was fear. This was happening so fast. He was so far above her world. And she'd been burned before by moving too quickly, by mistaking intensity for intimacy. He felt her hesitation a second before she pulled back, breathing hard, eyes wide and dark. Gabriel, Julia pressed her fingers to her lips. This is moving really fast. Everything in him wanted to argue, to kiss her again until she forgot her doubts. Instead, he forced himself to step back, giving her space even though it physically hurt. You're right, he said roughly. I'm sorry, Don't apologize, Julia said quickly. I want this too. I need to be smart. We barely know each other in person, and your life is so different from mine, and She stopped, frustrated with herself. Can we just take this slow? Slow. When every instinct screamed to make her his, claim her, never let her go. But Gabriel had spent his life learning control, and he could see the fear beneath her desire. Slow, he agreed, even though the word tasted like ash. But Julia, I'm not going anywhere. Take all the time you need. I'll wait. He kissed her forehead, chaste and tender, then forced himself to walk back to his car before he could beg her to invite him up. Julia watched him drive away, then went upstairs and leaned against her closed door, heart racing, body still humming from his kiss. She'd done the right thing, the smart thing. So why did it feel like she'd just turned away from something extraordinary? Over the next month, Gabriel courted Julia with a patience that surprised them both. Dinner dates at quiet restaurants where they could talk for hours. Weekend mornings at farmers' markets where he insisted on carrying her bags. Late-night phone calls that stretched until dawn, even though they'd spent the evening together. He was learning her, the way she hummed when she cooked, how she worried her bottom lip when thinking, the fierce protectiveness in her voice when she spoke about her father. Julia was falling, and it terrified her. Gabriel fit into her life in ways that shouldn't have been possible. He charmed her father during a Sunday visit, remembering details about the old man's navy, service, and asking thoughtful questions. He brought groceries without being asked, high-quality staples that lasted weeks. He never made her feel small for her modest apartment or her practical car or her off-brand everything. But the distance between their worlds showed in small ways. The casual mention of a business trip to Singapore, the way restaurant staff materialized around him with deference, the designer watch he wore without thinking, worth more than her annual salary. 6 weeks after their first date, Julia came home from an exhausting double shift at the clinic to find Gabriel sitting in the hallway outside her apartment, tie loosened, looking as tired as she felt. "Bad day?" she asked, and he nodded. "Can I just be here with you?" His voice held a vulnerability that made her chest ache. "Always," she said, unlocking her door. Inside, she made tea while he loosened his collar and sat at her small kitchen table. He didn't talk about whatever board meeting or business crisis had left him raw. He just watched her move through her space, and gradually the tension left his shoulders. "Come here," he said softly. Julia came, and he pulled her onto his lap, wrapping his arms around her waist, burying his face against her neck. She felt his exhale, the way his body relaxed against hers, and something shifted in her chest. He wasn't the billionaire here. He was just Gabriel, seeking comfort from the only person who'd ever offered it without strings. "I love you," he said against her skin, so quiet she almost missed it. Julia's breath caught. Her hands stilled in his hair. The words hung between them, enormous and terrifying and true. "Gabriel." He pulled back to look at her, eyes dark and serious. "You don't have to say it back. I just needed you to know. You're the only real thing in my life, Julia. The only person who sees me. I love you." Julia cupped his face, thumbs brushing his cheekbones, and saw her own feelings reflected back at her. "I love you too," she whispered. "I'm scared, but I love you." The kiss was different this time. Slower, deeper, weighted with emotion. Gabriel stood, lifting her with him, and she wrapped her legs around his waist as he carried her the few steps to her small couch. They sank down together, mouths fused, hands exploring with new permission. His fingers traced her spine through her thin shirt. Her hands mapped the muscles of his back. The heat built between them, urgent and sweet and overwhelming. Gabriel's hand slid under her shirt, palm warm against her ribs, and Julia arched into him with a sound that made him groan. He wanted her so badly it was physical pain. Wanted to strip away every barrier, lay her bare, worship every inch of her, until she knew how precious she was. But even through the haze of want, he felt her trembling, not just with desire, with fear. He gentled the kiss, then pulled back, breathing hard. "Julia, tell me what you need." Julia's eyes were huge, pupils blown, lips swollen from his kisses. "I need..." She struggled for words. "I need this to mean something. I need to know this isn't just passion that'll burn out. I need..." "Time," Gabriel finished, even as everything in him rebelled. "You need time to trust this is real." She nodded, grateful and miserable. "I'm sorry. Don't." He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her trembling mouth. "Don't apologize for knowing what you need. I can wait, sweetheart. For you, I can wait forever." The following week, Gabriel called her during his lunch break. "What was your dream? Before life got complicated, what did you want to be?" Julia, filing patient records at the clinic, smiled at the question. "A therapist. I wanted to help people work through their pain, you know. I did 2 years of my master's program before Dad got sick and the money ran out." "What if you could finish?" Gabriel asked carefully. "What if someone wanted to help make that possible?" Julia's smile faded. "Gabriel, no. I can't let you not pay for it," he interrupted. "I wouldn't insult you like that. But I know people. I could make calls, get you into programs with evening classes and financial aid you might not know about. Let me use my connections for something that matters." Julia was quiet, torn between pride and longing. Why? Because you gave up your dream to take care of someone you love, Gabriel said simply. Because you're brilliant and compassionate and you deserve to have both, the people you love and the life you want. Because I love you and I want to see you shine. 3 days later, Julia had an interview with the dean of the counseling psychology program at the state university. 2 weeks after that, she was accepted with a scholarship package that covered most tuition. She could finish her degree in 2 years with evening and online classes. She called Gabriel sobbing, overwhelmed with gratitude and possibility, and the terrifying feeling of her life opening up again. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for believing in me." "Always," Gabriel said, and meant it with everything in him. 2 months into the program, Julia was thriving. Her eyes held new light, her conversation sparkled with ideas from her coursework, and Gabriel had never been more in love. They spent weekends studying together in his penthouse, her with textbooks, him with contracts, and the domestic intimacy of it made him ache with want for more. For everything, for forever. But the pressure was building in other ways. Business partners who raised eyebrows at his regular girlfriend, society columnists who noted Julia's off-the-rack dresses at charity events, Gabriel's sister, Catherine, who barely disguised her disdain during a disastrous family dinner. "She's lovely, Gabriel, but so simple," Catherine had said after Julia excused herself to the restroom. "What could you possibly talk about?" Gabriel had left his own sister's house that night without dessert, furious and protective. But the seed of doubt had been planted, not in his mind, but in Julia's. She'd overheard, and every subsequent event, every subtle snub from his world, every reminder that she didn't fit, it built like pressure behind a dam. The breaking point came on a Friday night. Gabriel had to attend a last-minute gala for one of his companies. Julia came straight from class, still in casual clothes, planning to change in his car. But traffic made her late, and she arrived after the event started, flustered and underdressed. Gabriel met her at the entrance, concern in his eyes. "Are you okay?" "I'm sorry, the professor ran late. And then the traffic." She was fumbling with her dress bag when she saw the crowd inside. Women in designer gowns that cost more than her semester's tuition. Men in custom tuxedos. The glittering, polished world that was Gabriel's normal. "Hey." Gabriel cupped her face. "It's just a party. You don't have to come in if you don't want to." But she could see his colleagues watching, whispering. Could imagine what they thought. The gold digger, the project, the charity case. Everything Catherine had implied, without saying. "I should go," Julia said, pulling back. "This isn't my world, Gabriel." "It's just a party," he repeated, but there was frustration creeping into his voice now. "Julia, I don't care what they think, but I do." The words burst out, sharp with months of accumulated pain. "I care that your sister thinks I'm not good enough. I care that people look at us and wonder what you're doing with someone so ordinary. I care that no matter how much I accomplish, I'll always be the receptionist who got lucky." Gabriel's jaw tightened. "That's not fair. I've never made you feel—" "You don't have to," Julia said, tears burning her eyes. "Your world does it for you. Every time someone looks surprised that I have opinions, every time I have to Google etiquette for some event, every time I'm reminded that we're from completely different universes. So what?" Gabriel's voice rose, drawing more attention. "So we come from different backgrounds. So what, Julia? I love you. Doesn't that matter more than any of this bullshit?" "I don't know," Julia whispered. "I don't know if love is enough when the gap is this wide." The words landed like blows. Gabriel stared at her, something breaking behind his eyes. "Are you ending this?" His voice was flat, controlled, the businessman reasserting himself. Julia looked at him, at the man she loved with everything in her, at the impossible distance between their worlds, and felt something tear. "I think I have to," she said through tears, "before I lose myself completely trying to fit into a life I was never meant for." She left him standing there, walked away from the gala and the staring faces and the man who'd given her back her dreams. She cried the whole way home, knowing she'd just made the right decision and the worst mistake of her life in the same breath. Gabriel watched her go, surrounded by hundreds of people, and had never felt more alone. For 3 weeks, Gabriel functioned on autopilot. Board meetings, contracts, decisions, all of it hollow and meaningless without Julia's voice on the phone at night, without her laughter filling his penthouse, without her steady presence reminding him who he was beneath the empire. He threw himself into work, then into fixing what he could fix. He established a scholarship fund in Julia's name, full rides for caregivers pursuing advanced degrees. He quietly restructured his schedule to include more hands-on philanthropy work. He called his sister and told her exactly how her comments had damaged the best thing in his life, and that she needed to examine her own prejudices. But none of it filled the Julia-shaped hole in his chest. His breaking point came at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday, standing at his window watching the rain, phone in his hand. The grief counseling hotline number was still there, right next to Julia's contact. The symmetry wasn't lost on him. He'd found her by accident, lost himself in her completely, and now was more lost than before. Except he wasn't the same man who'd made that desperate call months ago. Julia had changed him, healed him, shown him he was worth loving for who he was, not what he provided. And he'd let her walk away, believing she wasn't enough, when the truth was his world wasn't worthy of her. Gabriel made a decision. The next morning, he called his executive team together. "I'm stepping back," he announced, delegating the CEO role to a managing board. "I'll remain chairman, but I want a life that's mine, not just an empire that owns me." His CFO stared. "Gabriel, are you sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything," Gabriel said. And it was true. Julia had taught him what mattered. Now he needed to prove he'd learned the lesson. He showed up at Julia's apartment on a Thursday evening. She opened the door in sweats and an old t-shirt, textbooks spread across her coffee table, and his heart clenched at how beautiful she was, how absolutely perfect and real. "Gabriel?" Her voice was wary, hurt, hopeful. "Can I come in?" he asked quietly. "Please, I need to say something." Julia hesitated, then stepped aside. They sat on her couch, careful space between them, and Gabriel turned to face her fully. "I was wrong," he said. "I was so focused on proving that our different worlds didn't matter that I never stopped to see how much my world was hurting you. I should have protected you from Catherine's cruelty. I should have skipped 100 galas to be with you instead of dragging you into spaces that made you feel small. I should have built a life that honored both of us, not expected you to just fit into mine." Julia's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "Gabriel, let me finish," he said, voice rough. "I love you, Julia Parker. Not because you fit some image, not because you're convenient or comfortable. I love you because you see me, the real me, the broken parts and the lonely parts and the parts that need someone steady and wise and kind to remind me what matters. You didn't save me. You showed me how to save myself. And I want to spend the rest of my life showing you that you're not just enough. You're everything." A tear spilled down Julia's cheek. "I was scared," she whispered. "Scared that I'd lose myself trying to be what your world expected. Scared that you'd wake up one day and realize you could have someone more. More than you." Gabriel shook his head, reaching out slowly to take her hand. "Julia, you're the smartest, strongest, Most compassionate person I've ever known. My world should be begging to be worthy of you, not the other way around. And I'm done with any version of my life that doesn't have you at the center of it." Julia looked at their joined hands, then up at his face, open, vulnerable, scared in the way that showed real courage. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I stepped back from Shaw Industries. I'm staying on as chairman, but the day-to-day will be handled by people who care about it more than I do. I'm saying I want a life, not just a career. I'm saying—" He took a breath, then slid off the couch to kneel in front of her, pulling a small box from his pocket. Julia's hand flew to her mouth. "I'm saying marry me," Gabriel said, opening the box to reveal a simple, perfect diamond. "Not because I want to own you or save you or keep you in some gilded cage. Marry me because we make each other better. Because I want to come home to you every night and wake up next to you every morning. Because I want to be your partner in everything, your dreams, your struggles, your beautiful, messy, real life. Marry me, Julia. Please." Julia stared at the ring, at his face, at the impossible, beautiful truth of this moment. "You really stepped back from your company?" "I want a life with you more than I want an empire," Gabriel said simply. "You're my empire, sweetheart. You're everything that matters." "Yes," Julia whispered. Then louder, through tears and laughter. "Yes, yes, I'll marry you." Gabriel slipped the ring on her finger, then surged up to kiss her, deep and claiming and tender all at once. She pulled him onto the couch, into her arms, and they held each other like people who'd survived a storm. "I love you," Julia said against his mouth. "I'm still scared, but I love you so much." "We'll figure it out together," Gabriel promised. "Whatever comes, we're partners now. Equals. Always." They married 6 weeks later in a small ceremony. Julia's father, Gabriel's closest friends, and no society columnists to judge her dress or his choice. It was perfect and intimate, and theirs. The wedding night, Gabriel carried her over the threshold of the small house he'd bought in her neighborhood, not the penthouse, but a real home with a yard and neighbors and space for Julia's father if he ever needed it. "You bought a house?" Julia asked, laughing through happy tears. "I bought us a home," Gabriel corrected, setting her down gently. "A life that's ours, not mine or yours. Ours." He kissed her softly, then deeper as she responded. Months of restrained desire finally allowed to ignite. His hands trembled as they traced her curves through the simple white dress. Her fingers worked the buttons of his shirt, mapping the warm skin beneath. They moved to the bedroom in a tangle of touches and whispered promises, learning each other slowly, reverently. Gabriel laid her on their bed, hovering over her with such love in his eyes that Julia felt her heart might burst. "I love you," he said. "My wife, my partner, my home." "Show me," Julia whispered. And he did, with kisses and caresses and a tenderness that spoke of forever. They came together in the dark, two incomplete people making something whole. And when passion blurred into intimacy and then into quiet contentment, they lay tangled together, hearts synchronized, finally complete. In the morning, Julia woke to sunlight and Gabriel's arms around her, and felt the rightness of it settle deep in her bones. This was what she'd been afraid to hope for. Not rescue, but partnership. Not being saved, but being seen. Gabriel stirred, pressing a kiss to her shoulder. "Good morning, Mrs. Shaw." Julia turned in his arms, smiling. "Good morning, Mr. Shaw." 5 years later, Julia had her doctorate and a thriving practice counseling caregivers and grief survivors. Gabriel's scholarship fund had helped hundreds of people finish degrees they'd thought impossible. They split their time between the house in Julia's old neighborhood and a cabin upstate where Gabriel had learned to appreciate quiet over empire. Julia was in her home office, finishing notes from a session, when Gabriel appeared in the doorway with 2 mugs of tea, their evening ritual. "Busy day?" he asked, settling onto the small couch she kept for moments like this. "Breakthrough with a new client," Julia said, joining him and curling into his side. She's finally starting to see that taking care of herself isn't selfish. Gabriel smiled, pressing a kiss to her temple. Good teacher. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set through the window. And Julia thought about the terrified woman who'd answered a wrong number call years ago, who'd been so afraid of being consumed by someone else's life that she'd almost walked away from the best thing that ever happened to her. "What are you thinking?" Gabriel asked, because he could always tell when her mind was wandering. "That I'm grateful," Julia said simply, "for wrong numbers and second chances and men brave enough to step off their pedestals." Gabriel's arms tightened around her. "I'm grateful for women strong enough to demand I be better, for partners who won't let me hide. For you, Julia. Always for you." She tilted her face up for his kiss. Still warm, still electric, still home after all these years. They'd built something neither could have created alone, a life where both of them mattered equally, where dreams were shared and struggles were faced together, where love was a daily choice and a permanent promise. Outside, the city hummed with evening life. Inside, Gabriel Shaw and Julia Parker Shaw held each other close. 2 once lonely people who'd found their way home through a wrong number and right love, and knew with absolute certainty that this partnership, this equality, this fierce and tender devotion, was the happily ever after they'd both been searching for all along.